Welcome to this Maths Made Easy video on surds. To start with, let's take a look at skill 1 on adding and subtracting surds. Now you can only add and subtract like surds, similar to how we would work with algebraic terms. So for example here, if we're doing addition, let's say we've got the square root of a plus the square root of a. Well, adding these together, what we'd get here is 2 lots of the square root of a. Okay? And an example here on subtraction, let's say we've got 7 root 2 minus 3 root 2. In that case here, subtracting these, we get 4 root 2. Okay. Be careful that you don't make a very common misconception here with addition and subtraction of surds. A common mistake here is to do the square root of a, for example, plus the square root of b, as simply the square root of a plus b. Okay, be careful. This is not true. Okay, so that gives us everything we need there for skill 1 on adding and subtracting surds. Let's take a look now at skill 2 on multiplying surds. To multiply surds, you just need to multiply the numbers inside the square root. So in that case, if we've got the square root of a times the square root of b, this is equal to the square root of a times the square root of b, and we can write that under one square root here as the square root of ab. Okay, and in that case this would be the square root of a times b. So for example here, if we've got the square root of 2 and we times that by the square root of 3, well, applying this rule here, we could write that as root 2 root 3, which we can write under one square root as the square root of 2 times 3 there. And if we evaluate this part here of 2 times 3, we get the square root of 6. And let's say we've got something a little bit more complicated here. Let's say we've got 2 root 3, and we times that by 4 root 5. Well here, what we'll do first is deal with these numbers on the outside, so the 2 and the 4 here. So if we times them together, that's going to give us 2 times 4. And now if we consider the surds here, again writing these under one square root, that's going to be the square root of 3 times 5. Okay. So here now, if we evaluate this, 2 times 4 would give us 8, and the square root of 3 times 5 would give us the square root of 15. So in that case, we get 8 root 15. So that gives us everything we need there for skill 2 on multiplying surds. Moving on now to skill 3, which is taking a look at squaring surds. So squaring surds is an extension on skill 2 of multiplying surds. Now if we square a surd, this gives us the number inside the surd on its own. So for example, the surd here of root a, if we square this, well that would be root a times root a. So that's where we're using skill 2 here now of multiplication of surds. And in this case, this result here would just simply be a. You could also verify this using what you know about indices. Root a we can write as a to the power of a half. So in that case, we times that by a to the power of a half. And remember, when you're times in here with the same base, we simply add the power. So that's a to the half plus a half. And in that case, we get a to the 1. So that verifies that fact there. So we take a look at 2 brief examples here. Let's say we want to find root 5 squared. Well, in that case, that's going to be the square root of 5 times the square root of 5, which simply gives us 5 there. Okay. And let's say we've got here 2 root 3 and we square that. So 2 root 3 and we square this. Well, in that case, this becomes 2 squared times by the square root of 3 squared. So the square root of 3 squared. And here now, well, 2 squared would give us 4. And the square root of 3 here, well, that would simply give us 3. So this is 4 times 3, giving us 12 there. Okay, so that gives us everything we need there for skill 3 on squaring surds. Moving on to skill 4 now, which is dividing surds. So to divide surds, you just need to divide the numbers inside the square root. So let's say we've got the square root of a over the square root of b. Well, we can write this under one single square root here, and that would be the square root of a over b. So if we take a look at some examples here, let's say we've got a square root of 12 over the square root of 4. Well, in this case here, we write this under one single square root, so that's going to be the square root of 12 over 4. And 12 over 4 we know is 3, so this becomes the square root of 3 there. And let's say we've got something a little bit more complicated here. Let's say we've got 6 root 10. So 6 root 10. And we divide this by 2 root 5. Okay, so 6 root 10 divided by 2 root 5. Well, we split this up here into 2 parts. If we consider 6 over 2 first, so we've got 6 over 2, and now consider root 10 over root 5. So this is 6 over 2 times root 10 over root 5. Okay. Well, here, what we want to do now is get these square roots under one single square root, applying this property here. So in that case, we can write this as 6 over 2, which is 3, times by the square root of 10 over 5. And in this case, this would simplify to give us the square root of 2, and what we obtain here is 3 lots of the square root of 2 there. Okay, so that gives us everything we need there for skill 4 on dividing surds. Moving on to skill 5 here, which is taking a look at simplifying surds. Now you can simplify a surd if the number underneath the square root has a square number as one of its factors. There may be more than one way to simplify a surd. So for example here, let's write the square root of 20 in its simplest form. Well, the key here is to think of a square number that is a factor of 20. So in this case, we note 4 is a factor of 20. So 4 is a factor of 20. So in this case, as 4 is a factor of 20, that would mean 4 times 5 gives us 20. So in that case, taking the square root of 20 then, the square root of 20, this means we can write this as the square root of 4 times 5. And then going backwards now on multiplication here, we can write that as 2 surds here, so that's the square root of 4 times the square root of 5. And we know we can simplify the square root of 4. The square root of 4 is simply 2. So that's 2 root 5 there. Okay, so that gives us everything we need there for skill 5 on simplifying surds. Let's take a look now at skill 6 on surds and double brackets. Now you can multiply out double brackets containing surds using the same techniques that you would for normal double brackets. So here, what we've got is this example where we're asked to expand and simplify 3 root 5 plus 2 root 2 all squared. So here what I'm going to do first is write this as the product of 2 brackets. So what we've got here is 3 root 5 plus 2 root 2 times 3 root 5 plus 2 root 2. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just apply FOIL here. So multiplying the first 2 terms together, and let's do this in a different pen colour just so we can see it clearly. I've got 3 root 5 times 3 root 5. So in that case, that's 3 root 5 squared. And we'll come back to this in a moment and simplify it. So I've got 3 root 5 all squared. So now let's do the outside terms. So that's going to be 3 root 5 times 2 root 2. So that's going to be plus 3 root 5 times 2 root 2. Okay. And again, we'll come back to this in a moment and simplify it. Let's just carry on with the expansion first. And now we move on to the I in FOIL, which means the inside terms. So that's going to be 2 root 2 times 3 root 5. So again, it's just the same here as what we had. So that's going to be 2 root 2 times 3 root 5 there. Okay. And finally, we arrive at the L in FOIL, which means we multiply the last terms together. So that's going to be 2 root 2 and 2 root 2. So what I've got here is plus 2 root 2 squared. So now let's evaluate each one of these terms as we go along. So here first, 3 root 5 all squared. That's going to be 9 times 5 here. So 9 times 5, that's going to give us 45 there. Okay, so we move on now to this blue part here of 3 root 5 times 2 root 2. So here, 3 times 2 would give us 6. So it's going to be 6. And then root 5 times root 2, well, that's going to give us root 10. So this becomes plus 6 root 10 there. Okay, and we can't do anything further with that. So we've got plus 6 root 10 there. And here, if we notice, this part in orange is just the same as this, just a different order, which doesn't matter because we're multiplying. So in that case, what I get then is another 6 lots of root 10. I also get plus 6 root 10, and same here, plus 6 root 10. And finally then, we arrive at this green term here of 2 root 2 squared. Well, in this case then, 2 root 2 squared, well, squaring the 2 first, that would give us 4. So I get 4 there. And if I square root 2, that would give us 2. So I get 4 times 2, which would give us 8 there. So simplifying everything here now, 45 plus 8 would give us 53. So what I get here is 53. And I've got 6 root 10 plus another 6 root 10. And if we collect those like terms here, what I get is 12 root 10. Okay, so that gives us everything we need there for skill 6 on surds and double brackets. And finally, let's take a look now at skill 7 on rationalising the denominator. So to rationalise the denominator, you need to remove the surd from the bottom of the fraction. And there's 2 different types of rationalising the denominator. You'll see an easy example here, or an easier example, and a slightly more complicated example here. So let's start with the easier of the 2 examples. We're asked to rationalise the denominator of the following fraction, which is 6 over the square root of 2. So to rationalise the denominator, we want to get rid of the denominator, or the surd here in the denominator. And to do that, all we do is we multiply the top and the bottom of the fraction by the denominator. So here I'm going to times top and bottom by the square root of 2, and again multiply the bottom as well by the square root of 2. So here what I get is 6 lots of the square root of 2 divided by root 2 times root 2. Now here, if we simplify the denominator, well, the numerator will remain the same, 6 root 2, and my denominator here will simplify to give us 2. And here now, if we think about this, I've got 6 root 2 divided by 2, so in that case, this just simply gives us 3 root 2 there, because 6 divided by 2 is equal to 3. And that's the solution there to this example of rationalising 6 over root 2 there. If we take a look at this slightly more complicated example now, where we're asked to rationalise the denominator of the following fraction, 4 over 2 plus root 5. Now here, this is slightly more complicated because we've got this denominator here of 2 plus root 5. Now we want to get rid of this surd again, and to do that, what we need to do is we need to multiply by the conjugate. And the conjugate here would be 2 minus root 5. That's how we get rid of the surd. So I'm going to times top and bottom here by 2 minus the square root of 5. And again, 2 minus root 5 there. Okay, so at this point now it's just a matter of expanding. So what I get here is 4 lots of 2 minus root 5, and this is all over 2 plus root 5 times 2 minus root 5. Okay, so my numerator here, that would give us 4 times 2, which is 8, and 4 times minus root 5 will give us minus 4 root 5 there. Okay, so that's the numerator simplified. For the denominator here, well, I'm going to get 2 times 2, which would give us 4. I'm going to get 2 lots of root 5 here, so that's going to be plus 2 root 5. I'm also going to get a minus 2 root 5 as well. So 2 times minus root 5 would give us minus 2 root 5. And finally then, root 5 times minus root 5 would give us minus 5. So in that case here now, the 2 root 5 will cancel with this minus 2 root 5. That equals 0. And 4 minus 5 would give us minus 1. So what I obtain here is a minus 4 root 5, all divided by minus 1. So in that case, what I would obtain here for our solution, so therefore this would be minus 8 plus 4 root 5 there, if we rationalise the denominator. Okay, so that gives us the solution there to our second example, and that gives us everything we need there for rationalising the denominator. And that concludes this Maths Made Easy video on surds.